The little girl looked directly into the millionaire's eyes and asked the question that completely changed his life forever. Can you be my dad? The entire room went silent. The housekeeper standing near the doorway turned pale immediately, and the man sitting on the expensive leather sofa suddenly realized that after years of living completely alone inside that enormous mansion, this was the first time someone had truly needed him. Before we begin, subscribe and leave a like if you enjoy. Emotional stories about love, healing, and unexpected families. New stories are uploaded every day, and don't forget to comment what city you're listening from. Can you be my dad? The question echoed through the living room like a punch to the chest. Ethan Cole sat frozen on the large gray sofa, wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, while trying to understand whether he had actually heard those words correctly. The 6-year-old little girl standing in front of him stared back with complete sincerity. Pink shirt, small jeans, old sneakers with worn-out shoelaces, and eyes filled with the kind of hope that almost hurt to look at. Behind her, Vanessa Parker, the housekeeper wearing the black and white uniform of his staff, went completely pale. Noah, her voice came out trembling immediately. She rushed forward, grabbed the little girl gently but firmly by the arm and pulled her backward. I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole. She doesn't understand what she's saying. We're leaving. Right now. The girl resisted slightly, still looking directly at Ethan. Confusion and sadness mixed together in her small expression, but Vanessa was already guiding her toward the front hallway, as if trying to escape before something terrible happened. And only then did Ethan finally recover his voice. Wait. The word came out louder than he intended. Both of them stopped immediately. Vanessa slowly turned toward him with terrified eyes, and Ethan suddenly realized she thought she was about to lose her job right there on the spot. He inhaled deeply, trying to control the strange emotional storm building inside his chest. You don't need to leave, he said more calmly this time. I just want to understand what's happening. Vanessa lowered her eyes instantly, unable to look directly at him. And in that brief moment of distraction, the little girl slipped free from her mother's hand and hurried back toward the sofa. She stopped only a few inches away from Ethan and said quietly, My mommy says you're a good man and that you take care of the people who work here. Ethan remained silent, and I thought maybe, she continued carefully, maybe you could take care of us too. The honesty of those words hit him harder than anything had in years. Vanessa covered her face with both hands and began crying softly in embarrassment. Ethan looked from the little girl to her mother and suddenly felt something inside himself move in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. Sit here, beside me, he said gently to the child. He pointed toward the empty space on the sofa. The little girl climbed awkwardly onto the expensive couch because it was slightly too tall for her. Once she finally sat down, her feet dangled in the air without reaching the floor. Ethan studied her quietly. Simple clothes, hair that clearly needed trimming, small hands folded carefully together. And despite everything, she still looked at him with warmth instead of fear. Why do you want me to be your dad? He asked softly. The little girl thought seriously for several seconds before answering, as if choosing every word carefully mattered. Then she finally said, Because you look sad like me. Ethan felt his chest tighten immediately. And my mommy says sad people need other sad people so they can feel less sad together. For 1 second, Ethan genuinely forgot how to breathe. He slowly looked toward Vanessa, who still stood near the doorway, wiping tears from her face, while trying desperately to regain composure. Vanessa, he said quietly, please come sit down. She hesitated, but eventually obeyed. She sat carefully on the edge of the armchair across from the sofa, like someone ready to stand and leave at any second. Ethan leaned back slightly while studying both of them. How long have you worked here? 3 years, sir, Vanessa answered softly. Ethan nodded slowly. And during those 3 years, you've always been punctual, respectful, discreet, and extremely competent? Vanessa looked confused now, clearly unsure where the conversation was going. Ethan continued, So explain to me why today you brought your daughter to work. Vanessa inhaled slowly. Her hands twisted nervously together in her lap before she answered, I didn't have another choice, sir. Her school is closed today because of building repairs, and my sister Yu, who usually watches her when things like this happen, got sick yesterday. Her voice shook slightly. I tried calling you this morning to explain, but you didn't answer, and I couldn't miss work because I really need the money. She lowered her eyes again. I thought maybe I could keep her quiet somewhere and you wouldn't even notice she was here. Ethan watched the exhaustion written across her face and realized immediately she was telling the truth. There was no manipulation there, only desperation. How old are you? He asked unexpectedly. Vanessa blinked in surprise. 28. Ethan quickly did the math in his head. She must have become a mother very young. And her father? Vanessa's eyes dropped instantly. He's not part of our lives, sir. He never was. The pain hidden behind that sentence carried years of silent struggle inside it. Before Ethan could respond, the little girl suddenly spoke again. My dad left before I was born, she explained matter-of-factly. Mommy says he wasn't a good man anyway, so maybe it's better like this. The casual way she said it disturbed Ethan more than if she had cried. Children were not supposed to sound that accustomed to abandonment. That must be hard sometimes, he said quietly. The little girl shrugged. I have my mommy. She's better than 10 dads. Vanessa let out a broken little sob beside them and covered her mouth immediately. And Ethan suddenly understood something very clearly. This woman was exhausted, not lazy, not irresponsible, exhausted. He remained silent for several moments while observing both of them, and without warning, his own life began, replaying itself inside his mind. The enormous mansion, 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a swimming pool nobody used, perfectly polished floors, silent hallways, expensive furniture, and absolutely no warmth anywhere inside it. Ethan Cole was 36 years old, owner of one of the largest real estate companies in the state, self-made millionaire, a man who had spent nearly 2 decades working 16 hours a day until success finally belonged to him. Now he had enough money to stop working, forever, if he wanted. But he continued anyway because stopping would force him to face the terrifying emptiness his life had become. He lived alone inside that gigantic mansion, woke up alone, ate dinner alone, fell asleep alone, and most weekends he sat on that exact same sofa staring at the television without even paying attention to what was playing. Somewhere along the way, his life had stopped feeling real, and he no longer remembered exactly when it happened. He had never married, never, had children, always claimed it was because he was too busy building his empire, but deep down the truth was much uglier. He was terrified of loving people, because every person he had ever loved eventually disappeared. His mother died from cancer when he was 15 years old. Doctors discovered it too late. His father drowned himself in alcohol afterward and died 3 years later in what everyone quietly understood had not truly been an accident. By 18, Ethan was completely alone in the world, and he promised himself then that nobody would ever have the power to destroy him emotionally again. So he built walls, higher and higher every year, until eventually those walls became a prison, and now here he was, sitting beside a 6-year-old girl who had asked him a single innocent question, and somehow those walls were beginning to crack. The little girl suddenly looked toward a large painting hanging above the fireplace. What's that? Ethan followed her gaze. That's a painting. She studied it carefully. It's pretty. Who made it? A famous artist a long time ago. The little girl nodded thoughtfully. It must feel nice making beautiful things like that. For the first time since the conversation began, Ethan smiled slightly. Yes, he said softly. I think it probably does. Then he looked toward Vanessa. Have either of you eaten lunch yet? Vanessa looked startled by the sudden change of topic. No, sir. I was going to eat after I finished cleaning. Ethan looked toward the child. And you? I had bread with butter before school, she answered honestly. Ethan stood from the sofa. Then let's fix that. Vanessa immediately rose too. Sir, I really need to finish working. The work can wait, Ethan interrupted gently. Food can't. And without waiting for arguments, he walked toward the kitchen. After a brief hesitation, both of them followed. The kitchen was enormous. White marble counters, steel appliances, modern lighting, and almost nothing inside the refrigerator except expensive ready-made meals Ethan never remembered to eat. He stared inside the fridge for several seconds before admitting, I should probably confess something. Vanessa looked uncertain. I'm terrible at cooking. The little girl giggled immediately. Ethan smiled again despite himself. But I can make sandwiches, he added. Do both of you like sandwiches? I love sandwiches, the little girl answered enthusiastically. Ethan began removing ingredients from the refrigerator. Vanessa stepped forward instinctively. Please, let me do it. Ethan shook his head. Not today. She froze. Today, he said calmly. You're my guest. Vanessa genuinely looked speechless now. And while Ethan prepared sandwiches at the kitchen island, the little girl climbed onto one of the tall stools and immediately began asking questions about absolutely everything around her. What does this machine do? That's an espresso machine. And this one? Blender? And why is your kitchen bigger than our apartment? Vanessa almost died from embarrassment, but Ethan laughed softly for the first time in months. It probably shouldn't be. The little girl accepted that answer immediately and continued talking, and Ethan found himself listening. Actually listening, not pretending. not distracted, present, something he had not truly been in years. Ethan finished preparing the sandwiches and carefully placed them onto proper ceramic plates instead of paper napkins. Then he poured orange juice into glass cups and carried everything to the large kitchen table. Vanessa still looked completely unsure whether she was actually allowed to sit there. The little girl solved the problem by grabbing her mother's hand and pulling her toward the chair beside her. "Sit, Mommy." Vanessa obeyed quietly, and the three of them began eating. At first, silence filled the table. Not uncomfortable silence, just unfamiliar silence. Then gradually the little girl started talking. About school, about her teacher, about a drawing she had made the previous week that received praise from the class. Ethan listened carefully while asking occasional questions, and every answer the child gave came filled with enthusiasm and imagination. Vanessa mostly remained quiet, occasionally apologizing whenever her daughter became too talkative. But Ethan quickly realized something. The child's energy did not bother him. Actually, it made the house feel alive. By the time lunch ended, nearly 40 minutes had passed, and somehow it felt like the most human conversation Ethan had experienced in years. Vanessa immediately stood up and began collecting the dishes. Ethan stopped her. "Leave them." "But later." Then he looked toward the little girl. "Would you like to see something interesting?" Her eyes widened instantly. "Yes." Vanessa looked nervous again. "Sir, really, we shouldn't." "It's fine." Ethan walked toward the staircase, and after a moment, both of them followed him upstairs. He led them down the second-floor hallway until they reached a door that remained permanently closed. Ethan paused there for 1 second before opening it. Then he switched on the lights. Vanessa gasped softly. The little girl froze completely. It was a fully furnished child's bedroom, race car bed, bookshelves, stuffed animals, colorful carpet, toy chests, wall drawings, everything immaculate, everything untouched. The little girl stepped inside slowly, like someone entering another world. "Whose room is this?" she whispered. Ethan remained silent for several seconds, then finally answered. "It was supposed to belong to my son." Vanessa looked toward him immediately in surprise. Ethan entered the room slowly. 5 years ago, I was engaged, he explained quietly. We were planning a wedding, planning children, planning a future. His eyes moved around the room carefully. I prepared this place because I thought someday a little boy would live here. His voice lowered slightly. But 3 weeks before the wedding, she told me she had fallen in love with someone else. Vanessa covered her mouth softly. Ethan continued. She said accepting my proposal had been a mistake, then she left. The room fell silent. I locked this door the same day, he admitted quietly, and I haven't entered it again until now. The little girl slowly walked toward him. He must have been really sad. Ethan smiled weakly. Yes, he admitted, I was. The child gently took his hand, between both of hers. I get sad too sometimes, she confessed, especially when I see other kids with their dads. Ethan felt something painful twist inside his chest, but my mommy says sadness goes away faster if people don't stay alone. He looked down at her small face and suddenly realized this little girl possessed more emotional wisdom than many adults he knew. Your mother sounds very smart. The child smiled proudly. She's the smartest person in the world. Then she released his hand and hurried toward the toy shelves with visible excitement. Meanwhile, Ethan turned toward Vanessa. Her eyes were already full of tears again. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable. Vanessa shook her head quickly. It's not that. She hesitated briefly. I just never imagined you had gone through something like that. Ethan gave a humorless little laugh. Appearances are misleading. Vanessa looked at him carefully now. Really looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, she no longer saw only the rich employer who signed her paycheck every Friday. She saw a lonely man carrying years of buried pain behind controlled expressions and expensive suits, and Ethan suddenly realized something equally uncomfortable. He had never truly seen her either. Not really. Not beyond the uniform, not beyond employee. Now he noticed details he somehow ignored for 3 entire years. The exhaustion beneath her eyes, quiet strength in the way she carried herself, the softness hidden beneath constant caution. And the strange thing was, he wanted to know more. The little girl grabbed a teddy bear from one shelf and hugged it tightly. Can I play with this? You can play with anything you want. The child immediately sat on the carpet and began inventing elaborate conversations between stuffed animals. Ethan watched her for several moments before Vanessa quietly spoke again. Sir, about earlier. Ethan looked toward her. She shouldn't ask people. To be her father. I'll explain to her why that's inappropriate. Ethan remained silent briefly. She didn't say anything wrong. Vanessa blinked in surprise. She just said what she feels. But it's not normal. No, Ethan answered quietly. What's not normal is a 6-year-old growing up without a father because someone decided she wasn't worth staying for. Vanessa had no response to that. The room fell quiet again except for the little girl's imaginative toy voices in the background. Eventually, Ethan sat on the edge of the race car bed while watching her play. After a few moments, Vanessa slowly sat beside him, carefully maintaining a respectful distance. There's something I should tell you, she said softly. Ethan turned slightly toward her. When Noah was born, I was 22, completely alone, no money, no support. Her hands tightened together. And honestly, I almost gave him up for adoption. Ethan stayed silent. But the first time they placed him in my arms at the hospital, her voice cracked. I knew I couldn't do it. Tears rolled quietly down her face. I would have rather starved than let someone take him away. Ethan felt his chest tighten painfully again. So I worked, he continued. 3 jobs at one point, cleaning offices during the day, waitressing at night, anything I could find. She glanced toward her son playing on the floor. Eventually I got this job here. Better pay, stable hours, more time with him. Ethan looked at her carefully. You're an incredible mother. Vanessa shook her head immediately. I don't know about that. I just survive one day at a time. Ethan nodded toward the child. Look at him. Vanessa followed his gaze. He's happy, smart, kind, safe with you. Her eyes filled again. That doesn't happen by accident. Vanessa smiled weakly through tears. Meanwhile, the little girl continued building entire fictional worlds with the toys. Ethan watched with fascination. She's incredibly creative. Vanessa immediately brightened slightly with maternal pride. He loves stories. Every night before bed, he makes me invent new ones. If I repeat old stories, he complains. Ethan laughed softly. That's a very good sign. His teacher says he's one of the best students in class. You must be proud. Vanessa looked toward the child with overwhelming tenderness. He's the reason I wake up every morning. That sentence hit Ethan harder than she realized because he suddenly understood something terrifying. He had money, success, luxury, everything society claimed should make a person fulfilled. And yet, he had nobody who made him feel necessary, nobody who made waking up meaningful. He looked at Vanessa again, and for the first time, truly saw how beautiful she was. Not glamorous beauty, not artificial beauty, real beauty, warm brown eyes, soft features, dark hair tied into a low bun, strength mixed with gentleness. And he realized he had absolutely no idea where her uniform even came from because, until today, he never cared enough to notice details like that. Now he wondered how many other important things he ignored during those 3 years. After another hour passed, the child finally began rubbing tired eyes. Vanessa immediately stood. We should go. I've already taken far too much of your time. Ethan checked the clock. Nearly 3 in the afternoon. Did you finish your work today? Vanessa hesitated. Not completely. I still need to clean the office and vacuum the downstairs living room. Do it tomorrow. Her eyes widened. Sir, I can't just leave work unfinished. It wasn't a request. Vanessa froze. Go home. Rest. Finish tomorrow. She stared at him speechlessly. Meanwhile, the child hurried toward Ethan. Thank you for letting me play. Ethan smiled softly. You can come play here anytime you want. The child's eyes widened dramatically. Really? Ethan glanced toward Vanessa, who looked just as shocked as her son. Actually, he added slowly, I have a proposal. Vanessa immediately looked nervous again. What kind of proposal? Ethan inhaled carefully before answering. From now on, if situations like today happen again, you can bring him with you? Silence. Vanessa genuinely looked unable to process the sentence. She can stay here while you work. There's plenty of space. Sir, I could never ask for that. You're not asking. I'm offering. But why? Ethan looked toward the little girl before answering honestly. Because this house is too large for one person. Then he looked directly at Vanessa. And because when your son asked if I could be his father, I realized something. Vanessa waited silently. I want to matter to someone again. Vanessa looked at him with an expression filled equally with gratitude and disbelief. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. The little girl suddenly threw both arms around Ethan's waist. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ethan almost lost balance from the force of the hug. And for reasons he couldn't explain, something warm spread through his chest, slowly, powerfully, like life returning to a place long frozen. He gently rested one hand against the child's hair. You're welcome, kiddo. Then he looked up and saw Vanessa crying again. But these tears were different. Relief. hope. And in that exact moment, Ethan understood with complete certainty that he had just made a decision capable of changing all three of their lives forever. The following Monday, Noah arrived at the mansion carrying a small backpack almost as big as he was. Ethan opened the front door personally because for the first time in years, he had actually been waiting for someone to arrive. The little boy smiled immediately the second he saw him. "Good morning." Ethan felt something strange happen inside his chest again. "Good morning, kiddo." Vanessa stood beside her son, looking slightly embarrassed. "I promise he won't bother you while I work." Ethan stepped aside so they could enter. "He's not bothering me." Noah walked directly toward the staircase like someone already familiar with the house. "I'm going to play in the race car room." Vanessa looked horrified. "Noah," Ethan laughed softly. "It's okay." The child disappeared upstairs seconds later, and suddenly the enormous mansion felt different, less silent, less cold, alive. Vanessa stood awkwardly near the entrance, holding cleaning supplies. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan noticed dark circles beneath her eyes. "You didn't sleep well." Vanessa looked surprised. "I'm fine." That wasn't an answer. She hesitated before finally admitting, "Noah had a fever last night. He's better now, but I stayed awake most of the night checking on him." Ethan frowned slightly. "And you still came to work?" Vanessa gave a tired little smile. "Single mothers don't really get sick days." That sentence stayed in Ethan's mind long after she walked away toward the downstairs hallway. For the rest of the morning, Noah moved. Throughout the mansion, like sunlight entering abandoned rooms. Sometimes she played upstairs, sometimes she sat at the kitchen table drawing. At one point, Ethan passed by the dining room and found the child speaking seriously to one of the decorative statues near the staircase. "What are you doing?" he asked. Noah looked completely serious. "Explaining feelings to him?" Ethan nearly laughed. "To the statue?" He looked sad. Ethan stared at the marble sculpture for a moment, then unexpectedly answered, "You might be right." Noah nodded like that made perfect sense, and somehow, inside the strange logic of childhood, it actually did. Around noon, Ethan walked into the kitchen and found Vanessa quietly rubbing one hand against her forehead while leaning over the counter. "You're exhausted." He immediately straightened. "I'm okay. You keep saying that while looking like you're about to collapse." Vanessa lowered her eyes. "It's just been a difficult few years." Ethan studied her, silently, then made a decision. "Take the rest of the afternoon off." Her head snapped upward immediately. "Sir, I can't." "Yes, you can. But the upstairs bathrooms they'll survive." Vanessa opened her mouth to argue again. Ethan interrupted softly. "That's not a suggestion." For a second, she simply stared at him, and Ethan realized something uncomfortable. Nobody had probably taken care of this woman in a very long time. Not properly. "Go home early today," he said more gently. "Both of you." Vanessa's eyes became suspiciously bright again. "Thank you." Ethan shrugged lightly. "It's not healthy raising a child while running on 3 hours of sleep." At that exact moment, Noah ran into the kitchen holding a drawing. "Look what I made." The child climbed onto one of the stools and proudly spread the paper across the counter. Ethan froze. The drawing showed 3 people standing together in front of a giant house. One tall man, one woman, one child between them holding both of their hands. Above the 3 stick figures, Noah had written carefully, in uneven letters, "My family." Vanessa immediately looked panicked. "Noah, honey." But Ethan gently lifted one hand, stopping her. The child looked at him nervously now. "Do you hate it?" Ethan stared at the drawing for several long seconds before answering quietly. "No." His throat tightened unexpectedly. "I think it's beautiful." Noah smiled instantly, and Vanessa looked like she might cry again. That afternoon, after they left, Ethan sat alone inside the enormous living room holding the drawing in his hands, and for the first time in years, the silence inside the mansion felt unbearable, because now he understood what had been missing from it. People, warmth, connection, life. That evening he walked upstairs and opened the race car bedroom again. He stood there silently while staring at the toys, books, and colorful walls. Then slowly, almost without realizing why, he began cleaning dust from shelves himself. The next morning, he stopped at a bookstore before work. And later that day, Noah arrived to find several new children's books waiting in the bedroom upstairs. The child gasped dramatically. "These are for me?" Ethan leaned casually against the doorway. "They're for whoever uses the room." Noah ran directly toward him and hugged him again without hesitation. And this time, Ethan hugged back immediately. Vanessa watched the scene from the hallway, while something emotional flickered across her face, something hopeful. The weeks passed, then slowly turned into months, and little by little, the routine inside the mansion transformed completely. Noah became part of the house naturally. The child drew pictures at the kitchen counter while Vanessa cleaned, played upstairs while Ethan worked from home, sometimes sat quietly inside Ethan's office, asking endless questions about business, buildings, and why adults liked spreadsheets so much. Ethan discovered he genuinely enjoyed answering every single one. And without noticing when it started happening, he began coming home earlier from work, because now someone waited for him there, someone excited to see him. Sometimes Noah would sprint toward the front door the second she heard his car arrive. Ethan, the child never called him sir, never called him Mr. Cole, only Ethan. And strangely, he preferred it that way. One evening he arrived home carrying a small bag from a bookstore. Noah immediately noticed. Is that for me? Maybe. The child opened the bag dramatically and gasped. A dinosaur encyclopedia. Ethan smiled. You said last week you wanted to learn about dinosaurs. Vanessa watched quietly from the kitchen doorway. You remembered. Ethan looked toward her. Of course I remembered. For several seconds something passed silently between them. Something warmer now, softer, more dangerous emotionally. Vanessa quickly looked away first, but Ethan noticed the faint blush rising across her cheeks, and he realized something that unsettled him deeply. He had started thinking about her constantly. Not only Noah, her too. The way she tied her hair back while cleaning, the quiet humming she did when concentrating, the exhausted expression she wore whenever she thought nobody was watching, and the small, rare smiles that somehow affected him far more than they should. One rainy evening, Noah fell asleep on the living room sofa after watching cartoons. Vanessa moved carefully to wake the child. Ethan stopped her softly, let her sleep. Then, before Vanessa could protest, he bent down and lifted Noah into his arms carefully. The child instinctively curled against his chest without waking up. Vanessa froze completely while watching him, and Ethan suddenly realized this was probably the first time Noah had ever fallen asleep safely in a man's arms. Something painful crossed Vanessa's face, too. You don't have to carry her upstairs, she whispered emotionally. Ethan looked down at the sleeping child. Yes, he answered quietly. I do. He carried Noah upstairs to the race car bedroom. Vanessa followed silently behind. Together they tucked the child into bed carefully, and for several seconds afterward, both adults simply stood there quietly watching her sleep. The room glowed softly beneath the warm nightlight beside the bed. Then Vanessa finally whispered, He trusts you. Ethan looked toward her. I don't think she's ever trusted anyone this quickly before. The vulnerability in Vanessa's voice made something inside Ethan ache. She changed my life already, he admitted quietly. Vanessa stared at him in silence. Ethan exhaled slowly. Both of you did. The atmosphere between them shifted instantly. Neither moved, neither spoke. But suddenly the air inside the room felt different, heavier, more intimate, more honest. Vanessa lowered her eyes first. This is dangerous. Ethan understood exactly what she meant. You're my employee. Yes. And you're a single mother, depending on this job. Vanessa nodded once. And you're lonely, she whispered carefully. And I'm lonely too. Sometimes lonely people confuse comfort with love. Ethan stared at her for several long seconds, then answered honestly, I know the difference. Vanessa looked at him again slowly. And for one terrifying moment, Ethan almost kissed her. But Noah shifted slightly in bed. The spell broke immediately. Vanessa stepped backward first. I should go finish downstairs. Then she hurried from the room before either of them could say something impossible to take back. Ethan remained standing there alone beside the sleeping child, long after Vanessa disappeared downstairs. And deep inside, he already knew something irreversible had begun. After that night, everything between Ethan and Vanessa became more complicated. Not openly, not dramatically, but quietly, in small glances, long silences, moments that lingered slightly too long before either of them stepped away. And the worst part was that both of them were painfully aware of it. Vanessa became more careful, more professional. Whenever Ethan entered a room, she suddenly found reasons to leave it. Whenever their hands accidentally brushed while reaching for something in the kitchen, she immediately pulled away. And Ethan understood why she was doing it. Because if this went wrong, she would be the one risking everything, not him. That realization alone made him even more careful with her. But it did absolutely nothing to stop what he felt. If anything, it only made those feelings stronger. One Friday evening, Ethan returned home unusually exhausted after a brutal day of meetings. The second he walked through the front door, Noah came running toward him, holding papers covered in colorful drawings. Ethan, Ethan, guess what happened today? And somehow, just hearing that excited little voice immediately made the stress inside his chest lighter. What happened? I got the highest grade in my class. Ethan smiled instantly. That's amazing. Noah practically bounced with excitement. My teacher said my story was the best one. Ethan knelt slightly. Can I read it? The child nodded enthusiastically and shoved the papers into his hands. The story was handwritten in messy, childish letters. And as Ethan read it, his chest tightened slowly, because the story was about a lonely king living alone inside a giant castle until a little girl and her mother arrived and made him happy again. At the bottom of the last page, Noah had drawn the three of them together. Again, family. Ethan stared at the paper longer than necessary. You really liked it? Noah suddenly looked nervous. It's dumb, right? No, Ethan answered immediately. It's one of the best things I've ever read. The child smiled again instantly, and from the kitchen doorway, Vanessa watched the scene quietly while emotion filled her eyes. That night, Ethan ordered dinner for all three of them instead of eating alone upstairs like he used. The routine had changed so gradually he barely noticed when it became permanent. Now they almost always ate together. Noah talked constantly during meals. Vanessa smiled more often, and Ethan no longer felt the desperate emptiness that once followed him through every room of the mansion. After dinner, Noah fell asleep early upstairs while watching cartoons. Vanessa remained downstairs folding laundry in the living room. Ethan sat nearby pretending to answer emails on his laptop. Neither spoke much initially, but the silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. Eventually, Vanessa broke it softly. You've changed. Ethan looked up from the screen. How? Vanessa folded another towel carefully before answering. You smile now. The sentence caught him off guard. She continued quietly. When I started working here 3 years ago, this house always felt cold. You barely talked to anyone.